I'm particularly pleased that for this exhibition we've managed to find a work by Joan Carlile, who, as you know, was a painter at the court of Charles I, who later moved to Richmond at the outbreak of the Civil War. But interestingly, there appears to be some similarities with what portrait miniature artists were doing at this date too.
So this is painted oil on copper, and I think I'm right in saying it's one of the only works known by her using copper as a support. And because it's therefore on this much smaller scale, it clearly relates to portrait miniatures. And I would say in particular the composition with this dark background behind the sitter and then this landscape with this sort of foggy ancestral home in the background really reminds me of works by John Hoskins and his nephew Samuel Cooper, who I'm sure Carlile would have known.
Because she presumably met Cooper and Hoskins after she moved to, or she would have been familiar with them, but of course she would have worked alongside them more or less in Covent Garden where she moved to.
Yeah, so we know that she actually had a studio in Covent Garden, so like a professional artist. She actually hired rooms and had a studio there, and Cooper lived and worked in quite grand premises in Covent Garden. And it was a very mixed but highly artistic community, of which presumably she would have been accepted as a professional painter. But I don't think this work was painted in Covent Garden.
No, so we think this one was painted a bit earlier in the 1640s, so it's presumably after Carlile had moved out of London and to Richmond. And it's one of a number of works by Carlile that have come to light in recent years. In fact, our gallery handled one a few years ago. That's now in the government art collection. And in fact, the Tate bought one a few years ago for their permanent collection. Really, I think the most defining characteristic of her portraits is the way that she painted the flesh tones. They've always painted this very sort of silvery manner. That's one of the key characteristics. But also the very confident way that she paints her sitters' costumes. And you can just see here on the sleeves it's painted with sort of very quick brushstrokes, quite thickly applied paint as well. And of course, because this work has survived in such good condition, you can really see those features in a way that isn't sadly possible in some of her other works.
So it's painted on this incredibly intimate scale, but we don't know who the sitter was, but I think we can assume probably a close acquaintance, because she hasn't commissioned a large painting for her home, something much smaller, but presumably no clues to the sitter.
No, she has in the past been incorrectly identified as the Duchess of Cleveland, but of course it isn't her. The dates wouldn't work at all. I think the Duchess of Cleveland would probably be about 10 when this work was painted. So we know it's not her, but no, we don't know who she is. But of course this was painted during a time of great austerity in the 1640s. The Civil War is raging. So this would have been a relatively inexpensive commission by comparison to one of Carlyle's larger small full-length portraits, which she otherwise would later specialise in.
She'd still put on her very expensive lace, the collar and bonnet, and then her nice pearls as well. So she's still wearing her finery, despite it becoming a Puritan world in which she's living. But there's something really intimate about not just the scale, but the way she's observed the face incredibly carefully. And even the hairline with this sort of very wispy hair and the way the lace is turning. She's sort of picked up some of the imperfections of the sitter, as well as her beautiful gown, and she's described that silk so well. She's a really incredibly good artist, isn't she?
Yeah, she is, and that's why I think it's just such an exciting addition for our exhibition.